Hey, this is Jamey Rowe. A lot of you guys know me from Guardian, but I'm also in the band Kalamity Kills these days, and you're listening to me right here, right now on the Head Smack Podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Hey, welcome to the Head Smack Podcast. My name is Paul Pavolny, and I have another misfit with me. I have Jamey Rowe, and he is the lead vocalist with a Nashville-based hard rock band Kalamity Kills, and is finding breakout success with the release of their powerful new song, Starry Skies, 988, featuring Aaron Gillespie of Underøath, an anthem for suicide prevention. The new single landed in the Billboard Top 40, man. Well done. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And as an independent artist, to be on the charts is pretty amazing. So, and with a song as powerful as that, touches on the things a lot of people don't talk about, which is, teen suicide or just suicide in general. And let people know that the 988 hotline is out there for them. And it's been a good thing. But thanks for having me here today.
Hey, man, I'm looking forward to the conversation. And so usually the way I like to start this out is just hearing a little bit about your origin story. Okay. And you can go as far back as you want. But just let us understand a little bit more about Jamey Rowe. Okay.
Well, my name is Jamey. I live in Columbia, Tennessee. My wife is named Amber, and we've been married almost 10 years. And life is really great. I'm at this point in my life where I seriously couldn't imagine it being better. So I'm very grateful for that. I always say my story is constantly being written, and I'm enjoying these current chapters right now. So that's good. But to be on the Misfit podcast, a conversation with misfits, I think you've got the king of misfits right here, because I've never been one of those that's really felt like I belonged or fit in, like in specific situations and whatnot. But I do have an identity as a believer in Christ. I believe all that Jesus stuff. That's when people ask me what my theology is. I say, I believe all that Jesus stuff. And that's really where I'm at. That has sustained me most of my life. I grew up in a Christian school and as a teenager, and wanted nothing to do with any of it because the hypocrisy was just so loud. Right. But somewhere along the way, God got my attention, and I decided to play music, for Christ, and start off.
How did it get your attention?
In my case, it was one of those things. I literally was in a church service and was watching everything and listening to everything. I had a great head knowledge of the gospel. I had a great head knowledge of Christ, but I wanted nothing to do with it. And I really felt, I didn't hear this audibly, but I really felt like God said, okay, I know these people, what they've done. What have I done to you? And I really came to that point where I realized, I had no issues with God. I had no issues with Christ. And I decided, okay, I'm here. I'm open, take my life. Here I am. And that was when I was 17. I'm 55 today, and I'm still going. I've been through the valleys, but I'm still going. But really, and I was in the band Guardian, which a lot of people knew in Christian music was a pretty popular hard rock band. I think we had something like 10 or 13 number one singles at Christian rock radio. We were probably on the cover of every Christian magazine. And plus we actually had videos on MTV when they actually played music videos. So we got around 35 countries. So to say a decade of my life making an impact to that, I can't talk about my life without talking about that. Yeah. And incidentally, I just got back from Mexico City this last weekend performing Guardian songs acoustically for people I haven't played for in forever. And just, they still sing along as if we're still an active band. It's pretty crazy. But really the thing is, in 2022, I started a new solo record. And once I started that record, I was listening to the music I was writing, and I was writing more hard rock again. And I realized it doesn't really sound like a solo artist. It sounds like a band. Yeah. And so I decided to come up with a band name to put on the project rather than just say Jamey Rowe. And I chose Kalamity Kills just because I thought it sounded cool. There's no deep meaning behind it. But the fact is, calamity does kill. Yeah. So you don't want calamity in your life. But and so we made the record, and while I was making it with my producer, Jamey Perrenot, I realized his involvement had gotten really heavy. So we decided when we went to mix, hey man, let's make Kalamity Kills a 50-50 partnership with us. And so we've started the band. So the band you have today with Julia Bullock on bass and Rod Bodley on drums and Jamey Perrenot and myself has been built over the course of the last 3 years. And so the solo album ended up being a real band. And like I said, having Billboard hits at this point is pretty crazy as an unsigned artist. And we're very thankful. And like I said, I don't view what I do anymore as Christian music. I just play music for everyone. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to be effective. But the thing is, if I ever have a chance to say something a little bit more in my music, because the accent I do speak with is prominent, I'm always going to take it. So I hope to make our music heavy, encouraging, something you can rock out to in your car. But at the end of the day, something also that's going to dig a little deeper in your heart and give you something valuable for your life.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So backtracking just a little bit
Yeah.
to your Guardian days, I know, within Christian music, probably hard rock, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe hard rock has probably got the toughest road to trek within Christian music. And so what was that like early on? Because, Christian music has gone through evolution. It's gone through changes. It's, leans into a certain area and then kind of pivots and leads into. So what was that journey like as a hard rock band within the Christian realm?
Within that time period, when we were doing that, it was pretty hard in ways because, like I said, rock wasn't nearly as acceptable as it is now. I cannot tell you how many, promoters would put us in churches that they'd never had a rock band before. And we'd get there and the church people were really upset that we were there.
Yeah.
We had a lot of that. And we were the first band in a lot of those churches that later, when I remember hearing the guys from Jars of Clay one time saying, we play all these venues and they say you guys were the first ones here, that we ever had and stuff, so we opened some doors for some people and people like bands like Petra opened doors for us too along the way.
Yeah.
But I always modeled more what we did as, we were a Christian band. We definitely had a purpose. Our purpose was to talk about our faith through our music. But I always viewed us more along lines of Stryper or something, or POD in the, just like we want to play for everybody. We don't want to put ourselves in a box. So we always made, in Europe, we only played mainstream venues and stuff. There wasn't that Christian music separation that there is here.
Right.
But dude, it was really tough. But I can tell you this, and I say this with a smile on my face. People always, say, oh, Christian music's inauthentic. Those people are hypocrites, or they're just like the world and stuff like that. There is some of that, but I'm going to tell you, we all during that period, I'm not just speaking for the band Guardian, but all my peers I dealt with, what we did, we really believed, and it was real. You know what I mean? So when I go back and I see a YouTube clip of me in 1993 bouncing around on stage, I may not have had the world's deepest theology and not enough life experience to know what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about, I believed 100%.
Right.
So, and so, that's a part of getting, with age comes with wisdom, and I'm a little bit smarter now than I was then, but still remain at the end of the day, I'm a believer who makes music.
Yeah. And so early on with even Guardians, what were some of the, you mentioned some of the challenges, you mentioned some of the things of being first. What were some of the other challenges that you had to face even within, your songwriting and how you started, expressing your creativity?
Yeah.
Because you definitely were the misfits, and hard rock is definitely the misfits. And I've actually even batted around the idea of doing a podcast called The Kingdom Misfits.
Yeah. I would be the first in line. I would be the king of it.
So what were some of those? So what was some of that like?
No, if I understand what you're asking and stuff, just, how we approached writing and stuff. First of all, like I said, we had a lot of radio success, but we never, ever sat down and thought about radio when we wrote our songs. We just wrote our songs, what I mean? And radio happened to pick them up, which was great. But we always strived to just be a great band. And that was the thing. Now, lyrically, we always, like I said, we existed to speak about our faith. So that was always, and there was an agenda with our music. It was, man, I'm sorry, I'm getting messages. I thought I silenced all this, but I'm trying. Sorry if anybody's just listening to this. My cell phone's going off. I'm trying to get it to stop. But creatively, like with Kalamity Kills, well, let me back up. With Christian music, I always put it this way. There's certain box lyrically that you have to stay in. You just do, and right or wrong, you do. And so I always put it as like, okay, we got these three colors. They give us three crayons, and they're three different colors. And you can only basically write and create with those three colors. Yeah. Well, these days with Kalamity Kills, I don't live in that box. So I get those three colors, but I also get the additional 5 to 6, 7, 8 that also come in the box to color with. So I think creatively I've got a lot more freedom these days, but I don't regret what we did. And there were times, there was a point in 1993 that we were asked to open Bon Jovi's like South Asian tour, like in Korea and whatnot. And this was out of my hands because management handled it. But part of that was they, to do the tour, we had to do a beer commercial. And, which to me, like, I've got nothing against beer. I don't drink beer personally, but I'm not one of those, people, you can't drink, you can't do the, sin. But we just didn't think that would be a good thing, for the band to send a message like, hey, they're doing beer commercials in, Korea and whatnot. So we pulled off that. So we missed some opportunities because of that. But I'm still getting back. I think you basically asked a creative thing. And like I said, for us, we just wrote what we knew. And we wrote, trying to offer hope in that thing. So the challenges would be more along, we do a really cool photo shoot in Paris for one of our record covers. And with this really cool rock and roll aesthetic, and the record label saying, you guys look like vampires, you know what I mean? And refuse to include the photos and stuff because, we're thinking of our audience and communicating that. They're thinking about the bookstore owner that's going to stock our CD and see our picture.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So those kind of challenges were very real. We were definitely pressured lyrically to be very clear and not really poetic, but to be very clear. And fortunately, I can't really point back to an instance where that prevailed, but there was definitely, I'd written a song on the Buzz record and it was just a love song. And I remember singing the lyrics and the president of the label, who was actually a good friend and everything. And I remember he said, he goes, we're a Christian label. He goes, we're not singing about girls here. We're singing about Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Everything. So, and so instead of finishing the song, I had Steve Taylor, who was producing at the time. He wrote the lyric to it. I said, Steve, I don't care what you write this about. Just keep a romantic feel to it. And he did. The song was called Are You Going to Keep Your Word? It was off the Buzz record.
Yeah.
But those were challenges and those are very real. People like to skirt around it and say they weren't pressured or something. No, you're pressured.
Right,
it may not be spoken, but it's pressure. Just like when you're giving interviews and stuff, you're pressured to say the right things, man. And, and sometimes that's at the cost of honesty, man. If I would have been at a press conference for a Miracle Mile record and said, hey, how's life? Well, life kind of sucks. The label issues means I didn't get paid properly and I had my electricity shut off this week, so life kind of sucks. But they don't want to hear that,
Right.
So,
they don't want the real stuff.
And that was reality,
Yeah.
But any of my peers and other bands like Bride, Bloodgood, Barren Cross, people like that I dealt with, we all share a similar experience. So it's like I've got this little little community of people who all went through the trenches that we all kind of have an understanding. We know what life was like,
Yeah. I think Jesus sometimes smiles at people that are fresh in their faith. They're not the as well versed as maybe others, but they're going in 100%.
Oh yeah.
I think he smiles at that more than he smiles or even enjoys people that will faithfully sit on the pew Sunday after Sunday and not make an impact on anybody around them at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you guys are doing, right?
I think absolutely. Even today, like I said, even with Kills not being a Christian band, I'm still, it's the accent I speak with, just like, if I was from England, you wouldn't say even though I can speak my best American English, there's something different. He's a Brit.
Right.
I think when I'm on mainstream radio and you're hearing us next to Korn and Disturbed, you may catch there's something different about that guy.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But man, you talk about the childlike experience and stuff and that naivety. I kind of love that. But, I think, when Christ says to be like a child, I don't think he means to be childish, but just to embrace that wonder that you have about all things. Like, I could be a kid looking at this Coke can, like mesmerized by this for like an hour, like just thinking, man, somebody made this and this came in a truck or something like that, just to be open and wonder, have a great wonder. And I hope I've retained some of that.
Yeah. And I think he wants us to have that wonder because, his creation is something that he called good and he created it. Unlike, you never see a squirrel going, man, what a great sunset, or like, wow.
Maybe they do.
Yeah, maybe they do. Maybe they do. But, God created, there's a part of him in us. And so, he creates this wonder of things that we should have. And I think, young believers, new believers, Christian believers, they sometimes approach even their faith with that naivety and sometimes push the boundaries, and sometimes push against those walls that they feel they're in, and they get kickback. They get people that don't like it, but they're just trying to express their awe and their wonder in a way that is not the standard thing.
Yeah. And, and I've got a lot, I know the grace that's been given to me in my life. And so I'm way more willing to extend that to others too these days, because I know what has happened in my life. And like I said, there's a lot, most people I've ever encountered in Christian music are really well-meaning, really well-intended people. Yeah. There are a few people along the way that found out a way to make a buck and push that, but they're usually not on the stage, usually behind the desk. You know what I mean? So it's just a crazy world, man. But I'm just thankful that I have a good life in 2025. Man.
Yeah, and I think
I did a lot to try to make sure I didn't along the way. Yeah.
Well, so. and I think people do that sometimes, and so often is they judge people. A pastor once said, "Is we judge others by their behavior, by what we see, and we judge ourselves by our intent."
Yeah, man, that's perfect.
Something to that realm, and I think that happens.
I said something recently similar to that. I made a little video post. I was like, it's like, when you do it, you're in sin. You're disappointing God. Blah blah. When I did it, I made a mistake.
Yeah,
and so if we, and that both are probably true to an extent, but when that thing where I made a mistake, well, chances are you made a mistake too.
Right.
And your story's not over.
Right. Well, and I think even, in the 80s and 90s, with bands like Stryper and stuff like that is, so quickly judged of, that can definitely not be Christian, and the whole, backwards masking and, they're, everybody's, they're evil, they're, whatever. And I think we judge so quickly when the intent, was from a place of sincerity.
Yeah. No, really so. And especially with the Stryper guys who are like extended family to me. I mean, I've heard some of the stuff they put up with, they've had, people spit in their face, tell them they're not of God and everything like that. And, and the fact is what they start in like 83 or something like that. And they're still around today. Yeah. And they're still doing what they do. They went through a season in 89 or 90 where they kind of, had really just gotten sick of being, attacked by Christians, and decided, let's just be a band. And they went through their words, not mine. They went through a period of rebellion, and God called them out of it, man. And so here they are, they're still making music, doing their thing. Actually, they shot a documentary film this last year, and they actually came here to the house. And so we're like right here where I'm sitting is where I was filmed. And just pure, just foolishness on my part. I got my weight under control last fall. I kind of got sick of it. And so I've lost 100 pounds. Oh, wow. And so, which is good. I still want to lose about 15 if I can, but I'm okay at this point. Like, okay, I've lost the bulk of it. But man, when I saw some of that footage back and just saw my face all wide and everything, it's like, and if that does get on a big screen, it's going to be like monstrous, this monster guy. And it's going to have my name up there.
But look like an emoji. Yeah.
I was really happy to be a part of that. And, but yeah, I think a lot of people are definitely misjudged. Yeah. And that's just the nature of humanity, it seems,
So, and I want to have Stryper on this podcast as well. I absolutely love him. I didn't love him as much at first because it was like, that's so bad. And all the, elders were like, they're terrible. So yes, I probably had that album. I probably had that album. Right here. So I went in the less aggressive route of Petra and White Hart and all of that stuff. But, I want to hear some of the Jesus stories, because you are so out there with being so different in the Christian realm. What are some of the Jesus stories of you bringing your version of Christian music to people? What are some of the Jesus stories that you have from that?
I will tell you right now, and I would almost tell you that by the end of the day today, I will get a letter from someone or a comment or something that say, hey, I saw you guys in concert in blah, blah, blah in 1996, 97. It could be anywhere in the world. And usually it's not so much about the music, it's how we treated people. They say, hey, I met you. I met you after the show and you said some cool things to me. And it set me on a road to, where I think, and everything like that. And, hey, I'm a pastor now. I hear stuff like that all the time.
Wow.
On the flip side, I also hear like, man, I no longer have faith, but I really cherish how kind you guys were to me and everything like that, and make an impact and stuff. And I just feel like, man, everybody, like I said, the story's not over. So if they go through seasons where their faith is dipped, God is faithful, man. Right. I really believe that. But I can think of instances. One time we were playing at a festival in France, and it was a Christian festival. And one of the reporters, they're real big on press conferences over there. So after they set you at a table and it's like this big ordeal, and a guy who usually looks like a game show host is hosting it. Hey, everybody. And one of the reporters came and stood up through an interpreter, said, I know nothing about your music. I know nothing about your faith, but for some reason I felt compelled to give my heart to Jesus when you guys played. And we're all like, and they're saying it through an interpreter, and we're like looking at each other like, that's when you really feel like, okay, God used us. Yeah. Because we were singing in a language they don't know and stuff like that. So sometimes, man, I understand God uses flawed humans, and we all realize our flaws, and to see that happen, like, okay, well, okay, cool. Maybe God really does use this beyond us just enjoying ourselves playing music. Right. Right. I can think of that. I can think of, plenty of times in Latin America where the language barrier. Now we recorded some songs in Spanish, and they did really well down there. I don't speak Spanish, but evidently I can sing it phonetically really well. Seriously, supposedly it sounds legitimate. And so I can tell you that was another thing of all the things you plan as a band. Okay, we want to do this tour, we want to do this, and we'll do this in a line, and that may take us to the next level of success. The one thing we had absolutely nothing to do with, singing in Spanish, because we did it, the label asked us and said, yeah, we'll give it a shot. And I put me in a translator, and we forgot about the record. Then a year later, we play Costa Rica, and like everybody, the arena, and when I say arena, I mean arena is filled, and they know all the words, and they're singing it back to us. We realized we had nothing to do with that, man. Wow. And to this day, we all recognize that. Wow. So, yeah.
And so, you've talked about, playing the arenas and everything like that. But when you first started and when you started launching into this, what was the moment that you realized, do you know what, this is going to work? This is going to happen?
Man, to be fair, I kind of felt that from day one. I knew it would take some time, but I knew what we had when I joined Guardian and the record we made, Fire and Love with the Elefante brothers. I knew we had something really special. Yeah. And so I knew it was just going to be a matter of time. Did I know what that looked like exactly? No, but I knew we were going to do something, because just from a music fan point of view, what we did was really good. Yeah. And we put in the work, we toured, and we always made sure that, we didn't treat our fans like fans. We treated them like friends and thanked them for supporting us, and always made time for them. But I can tell you one time we were on, I originally grew up in Indiana. I'm from a very small town called Oakland City, Indiana, like literally 1,500 people. And I remember being on stage at Flavo Festival in Holland. And I think there was like 12 or 14,000 people all singing along. And I remember on the stage, like sitting there thinking, seeing people sing back words that I wrote on the side of my bed. I was sitting there thinking, I literally stopped. I have this embedded in my mind, thinking to myself, I'm from Oakland City, Indiana. Wow. How did I get here? Wow. And I always knew that was God. Yeah. I think we all need to sometimes have those hyper awareness moments, like, and those happen throughout life. Like for me, when I first came to America, and my brother came a year after I came to go to college, and, we took a school trip, and one of the trips, and it was in California, was to go to San Francisco. And so my brother and I were walking across the Golden Gate Bridge, and I had one of those moments like, man, we're a couple of young immigrant guys from the west side of Melbourne, Australia. And here we are standing on the Golden Gate Bridge. It was one of those hyper awareness, all your senses, popping off type moments. I completely understand that. And a similar thing when we got to go to Australia as Guardian, we got to go in 94. Same thing, man. I was like, what am I doing here? And in the back of your mind thinking, okay, they're going to find out you're not really qualified to be here and kick you out. You know what I mean? So it's like, I always had that feeling. Like I felt like we were in arenas that were like a little bit outside of our league, but God put us there,
Yeah, that is so amazing. And so, we've talked a little bit about, Guardian, but I definitely want to talk about Kalamity Kills, and especially your new song and Starry Skies, and kind of the journey that led you to to write that and
Mm-hmm.
to put that out there. What was that like?
Man, the song, actually wrote that song, the bulk of it. I co-wrote it with Jamey Perrenot, my producer. He came in, I brought in a completed song, and he kind of added some tweaks to it that really helped it come alive. But lyrically and everything, mostly I had it written, and it was, once again, here in this kitchen. Everything I do happens in this kitchen, everything. So I had my acoustic guitar out, and I remember scrolling through TikTok, and I saw this like news report / post about this girl in Indianapolis, Indiana, that was like, I think she's 10 or 12 years old, but she was being bullied at school, and she killed herself and like hung herself. And I just thought that was just such a horrible thing. And then of course I follow the story, and I go in and I see pictures of the grieving family and this girl, just how just sweet she looked and everything. And sitting there thinking, man, she missed out on a great life because of some cruel kids.
Yeah.
And
wow.
it really got me. And then the thing is, I've dealt with depression in my life too. Now I don't say this boastfully, but I don't know what happened, but in 2020, I was able to get off all antidepressants and everything. And then like, I just don't deal with that. There's some supplements I take, like DHEA and NAC, which are natural supplements that seem to keep the anxiety at bay. But I haven't dealt with depression like that. But the thing is, I know what it's like to sit there at the stoplight in front of a train and sit there thinking, you know what, if I just pulled my car forward, all my problems would go away.
Wow.
You know, I've had those thoughts. I think I don't want to speak for everybody. I would think to an extent everybody does, but when you're in a depressive state, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I wrote that song just thinking about that little girl, and because I thought there's a lot of people that probably feel this way, and they're hurting, and you know, and maybe they don't want to go talk to somebody in family or friends because they're embarrassed. And I started thinking about the 988 hotline we have here in the US, you know, which you can text or call or anything. And somebody who's, you know, trained to counsel you is there for you, and it's 100% free. So I wanted to make sure that was part of the title. So that's why the song is called Starry Skies 988. So even when you go to the Touch Tunes jukebox, you know, here in, you know, whatever, Buffalo Wild Wings here in town, you pull up that song, that 988 title is there.
Wow.
And it was just to create awareness. I mean, and then obviously getting Aaron from Underøath, who has a pretty high profile, drew more attention to the song than we would have probably gotten on our own. And he did a feature vocal and played drums. So all that stuff was just a great way to get the message of the song out. And, you know, and like I said, to have a success with it that we did, you know, it made up to 32 on Billboard, which if your listeners don't know, or if you don't know, dude, getting on radio as an unsigned band, when there's so much competition, there's so much, you know, there's only so many 3 or 4 minute slots radio has a day to add new songs.
Right.
And to give us a shot was pretty cool. So, and I've never gotten the letter from someone that says, hey, I've heard this song and I was really thinking about, you know, killing myself and it stopped me. I have not gotten that. But in my heart, I'm hoping that's happened somewhere along the way. Planted a seed, you know?
Right. Right. Well, and that's sometimes what it takes is just planting that seed, because you know, we don't always know who's going to be doing the watering. We don't always know who's going to be doing the reaping. Sometimes we're just called to be seed planters, you know, and we don't, you know, in our lifetime or in our situation or our circumstance, we don't always see what that seed generates, you know. And so it's, you know, I'm sure it's definitely making an impact, because it is, and they say that depression amongst young people is higher than ever.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
Yeah. And so, you know, in writing the song, were there moments that that really hit hard for you because of what you had gone through?
Yeah, just there's a certain line. If you listen, there's a breakdown prayer. It's like, you know, like there's one part that says, I can't fight the madness anymore. You know, that frustration, you get to a point where you've just been there and done that. And then towards the song, there's hope. There's little sprinkles where one thing, who is going to care if I'm alive? And then, you know, the lyric is like, the chorus is, you know, melancholy mind, poison in my heart tonight. You know, all this, like, it's kind of painted negative, but as the song progresses, you get to the end where they call the 911 hotline. It says, a stranger on the phone convincing me I'm not alone. So it tells the story, and it ends in a hopeful thing, even though the first half of the song, if you just listen to the first half, you think this is a pretty dark song, but no, it leads to hope. It just lays out the story. So creatively, that was cool as a songwriter to craft a story like that. But, like I said, I just write what I know.
Yeah.
You know? And that was the best way I could tell that story.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as it's gone out there, you've mentioned you haven't gotten the feedback yet. You know, did you have a picture of somebody in mind as you were writing it specifically, apart from that girl? Yeah.
That girl, and then even myself, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things that I've been through. I've obviously, thank God, I've never been to that point, but what's to say I wouldn't be, if things hadn't turned around and stuff. But it just breaks my heart because, I think of my life 10 years ago today, even just how different it was. I was going through a tough time. I was actually going through a divorce and, basically, sleeping on floors, semi-homeless. And to 10 years later, I had this wonderful life. And I think, man, what if I would have gotten really depressed and I would have missed all this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so your story gets better. And this is not in the song, but it's something I always say when I'm talking about it, is I remind people that you've survived 100% of your worst days.
Yeah.
You're stronger than you think. And I know it sounds like a bumper sticker, but it's true. And so I think, man, okay, this too shall pass.
Right.
But there's a 10 or 11-year-old girl who didn't think that. And now she's needlessly gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with what you're doing now, with even the touring and everything else, what kind of crowds are you attracting now? Are you finding that there's a new generation coming up? Are you attracting?
Yeah, I can cut you off there. It's funny. The only thing I have really to base it on is Spotify statistics. And like my former band and stuff, our audience skews older. So it's like 45 and older. But our largest demographic listener base is 25 to 35 with Kalamity Kills. Like that's the, like by and far the majority, so it's a generation younger than, Guardian music, because most of those people weren't even born when Guardian was around. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's been cool. And for the longevity of a band, that's a great thing to be a part of, because, they're going to stick with you for the next, 2 decades, hopefully. But, I think the music of Kalamity Kills definitely skews younger. I mean, because, I'm not a metalcore artist. Like I don't, I'm not the, right. But there are elements of that music that I like, and production wise, I put them in Kalamity Kills. Jamey Perrenot and I, put our heads together, like let's make this killer breakdown, of like all this like, sci-fi sounding guitars and stuff, and that appeals to a younger group. And to be fair, older people I found, the Guardian audience don't really like to stream music; they want to buy a CD, and so it's crazy. And a lot of times they don't get the new style of, they want a guitar solo and not a guitar breakdown. So there's been a thing. And I was very, very intentionally, I never tried to build Kills off Guardian. I wanted Kalamity Kills to be its own thing. And so I didn't cross the two or anything. And it worked. It really worked, because we don't have the Guardian audience. We have the Kalamity Kills audience, which is smaller, but you would expect that compared to, 3 years compared to 30. So.
Right. And what other ways would you differentiate the two in what it was with Guardians and what it is now?
Well, like I said, with Guardian stuff, we were an agenda focused band. We existed to make music to tell people about Jesus. Kalamity Kills makes music with the agenda to make music, and it's for everyone. And if I want to write, if I want to write a mindless song about a summer day, I'm going to do it. But if I want to write something about, a crisis of faith, I'm going to do that too. Yeah. But always with the intention at the end that people walk away with a sense of hope. Yeah. But I don't like to put us in the Christian music box, because at this point, Christian music is basically for Christians. It's an encouragement thing. People will say, it's evangelical, but then they'll go, they'll strictly play in churches and strictly play in a subculture. And that's not really reaching people. That's entertaining, those who are already in the group, so to speak. Right. And, and there's something appealing to me that God gave me certain gifts, and I don't just share them with certain people. I share them with everyone. So, and, it's like I said, I've built up a name in Christian music. So some of the doors, if I went that route, would open up a little bit easier, but that's just not where my heart is right now. Yeah. My heart is just to be real, authentic, and scars and all, show it all. This is who I am through music, Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there are some people that are fine with just fishing in the fish tank, No, that's exactly.
But Jesus also said, I want you to go out, and I want you to go cast some nets in new places, Yeah.
Well, not to get too deep, but man, Jesus, I think I can't find in scripture where he really condemned sinners, but he had a whole lot of condemnation for the religious folks. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think he had compassion for people who didn't know him, and had a lot of, I'm not going to say disappointment, just like, or even anger, just like, okay, guys, get together, to the people who were, flying the flag for him,
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody, what's the scripture where he says, you go across, the earth and seas to find one convert to make him twice the son of hell as you. I don't know the exact thing, but sometimes I think, okay, did the church get that memo, and did they change course? I really don't think so. You know what I mean? So we still got a lot about that. So I would rather be in a room where one person walks away considering eternity than a whole room that considered it from the beginning and are just, attending the pep rally.
Wow.
If that makes sense. So
yeah. Well, and without having a label also dictate to you what the formula is, like you mentioned early on about giving you the 3 crayons and say, we can do anything you want, but you got to use these 3 crayons.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you've got the liberty to do whatever you want and write that love song, if you want to.
I can, and I have, even in Starry Skies, I said damn, which, a lot of people, and the thing is, it wasn't just so I could cuss, but when you're in that kind of pain, when you say it's so damn hard, that's real. And that's another thing where I chose realism over, just like sanitizing it. And
right.
stuff. So, and within Christian music, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a Justin Bieber song recently that he sang where it was like super transparent about, his life growing up. And I can't remember the title. I can't even, mention the lyrics, but I do remember that he had cussed in that, but it was such a dramatic necessity for the song and for what it was about, that it was almost to shock you, because it was like almost his heartfelt cry of him about his growing up, and then he cusses in it, and it's there for impact to sometimes stir people up and saying, this is you didn't give an F about this, for
real,
and it worked. And I think he even sang it on Saturday Night Live. And so I understand, where you're coming from in including that word, because you're dealing with such a topic that we sometimes don't want to talk about, or we know about, but we don't know how to talk about it.
Or we want to give them all the answers before we even know the question. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so what's next for Kalamity Kills? Where are you going next?
Okay, well, Kalamity Kills, we released the first record independently through ourselves. We did a Kickstarter campaign, and we've kept purposefully kept like copies to a minimal to encourage streaming and whatnot. But I believe it's September, I want to say September 18th, or it's sometime in September, we're releasing a deluxe edition of the record with like 5 or 6 new versions of songs to add to it. So to a lot of people, that's actually going to be their first exposure to the band, because it's going to be an actual release where it's coordinated. We've got press lined up for it and everything. So it's going to be meet Kalamity Kills again for the first time. You know what I mean?
Nice.
We've got a new single called Afraid that's out right now, that's on the US, and it's on media base. It's 44 this week. And I think on Billboard it's 45. So we have another song that's climbing the chart, which, as I said, once again, I'm super grateful, because it's just, they say like a helicopter shouldn't fly on paper if you draw it out, or somebody always say that. Same thing here. Like Kalamity Kills should not be on the charts, but here we are,
Yeah. So what's that latest song about?
It's Afraid is about basically just, not being afraid. I mean, it's the title, but it's like, it's about gatekeepers and people trying to tell you, keep you down, hold you down when you've got a voice. And it says, and I don't, it's so funny because it's almost political, and it was never intended to be a political song. And I think this song's not left or right, but it's for anybody who's fed up. It says, we don't bow to the throne of enemies. We don't back down to your lame, hostilities. Everybody in their life encounters, maybe it's somebody, a boss or somebody at work, that just doesn't like them and wants to keep them down or something like that. They come over and go to do, oh, that's great, but blah, blah, blah. It's about just kind of standing up for your beliefs and everything, and not being afraid. It's like, never be afraid. I mean, I don't know how to complicate that more than that really is,
Yeah.
And it's an anthem, and we have Ray from Korn playing drums on it. So they're, the Korn audience, that brings a lot of eyeballs in too. But it's going well, and I think it's one of our best songs.
Wow.
So
Well, proud of you guys and all that you're doing, man.
Thank you.
And appreciate you and the song Starry Skies. And I've
Yeah.
listened to it and I've enjoyed it. I've shared it with my kids.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Because it is a topic that needs to be talked about, and statistics are saying that kids are dealing with some of those issues more and more. The TikTok generation, and having something out there that speaks to them in a way that they understand and in a way that they can relate to is super powerful.
Yeah, and kids are growing up a lot faster than they used to. A lot faster than I did, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So,
well, man, this has been amazing. Absolutely have loved
Dude,
this
I love it.
conversation,
Yeah.
and proud of what you guys are doing. And this is just amazing.
Like I said, man, if you ever want to talk to the King of Misfits, you're looking at him, and so I'm pretty stoked. And like I said, but at the same time, man, I want people to see, like, look, man, I'm a bit of a goofball. I don't have everything together, but I do have hope, man. And since I was 17, I always say I believe all that Jesus stuff, man. I really do. And no matter who I meet, no matter if they're the polar opposite of me, I always remind myself, man, as a believer, I believe we're all made in the image of God, the image of the Creator. And I've never met someone who wasn't. So I try to extend love and kindness to those around me, much like we're called to,
right?
Even if they don't agree with me,
right? Right. And that's ultimately what we're called to is to love everybody, not necessarily have to agree with them.
Yeah.
But definitely have to love them and honor them. So, man, I love this. And is there one question that you wish I'd asked you? Because I don't want to leave my guests feeling, man, I wish you'd asked me this, because I really want to. I can't
think of anything, but I can tell you this. When we started the interview, I don't know if this was part of it. There was a storm. It was in the middle of a severe storm, and now it's perfectly sunny skies. So welcome to Tennessee. And that just showed, that's an analogy. Everything always works out.
Yeah.
But if people want to check out the band, go to calamityKills.com. All of our social links are there, and it's with a K, Calamity. But man, I could sit here and tell you like how much I love my band and whatnot. But the bottom line is that if you listen to it and you like it, great. If you don't, there's plenty of music out there for you too. I just know everybody has different tastes, but I'm thrilled to death when somebody checks into our music and connects with it.
And I'll definitely put the link in the show notes. And I definitely encourage you to check it out, share it with your kids, share it with your friends, and let's get them some encouragement. Let's get them something that can listen to and know that there's somebody out there that relates. There's somebody out there that cares about them. And definitely check out CalamityKills.com. Check out the music, get the new album, get the new song, download it. And appreciate you, Jamey. And this has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you, my brother.
You are listening to Conversations with Misfits, Mavericks, and Trailblazers.